Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Philip Phillips, and I'm the Associate Dean of the University Honors College, and I welcome you here today to our Honors Lecture Series. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Laura Blackwell Clark is Interim Director of the Center for Educational Media and faculty member in the Educational Leadership Department of the College of Education here at MTSU. At CEM, Dr. Clark directs staff engaged in video production and TV broadcasting with a focus on educational video programming and K-12 teacher professional development. She also teaches in the MTeach program training mathematics and science teachers. Her research interests include biculturalism of Latino teens and the intersections of culture and education, both in practice and in educational policy. Currently, Dr. Clark is part of two teams conducting research on culture and education. One, examining the cultural adjustment of Saudi Arabian women in graduate studies at MTSU, and another, looking at barriers to higher education for immigrant and refugee students in Tennessee. Dr. Clark's latest professional endeavor is a grant awarded by the Tennessee Board of Regents for student engagement, retention, and community building among Latino students at MTSU, entitled La Comunidad at MTSU. Her presentation today is Tennessee Dreams, Stories of Latino Immigrants in Middle Tennessee. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. I'm so pleased to be here today. Bear with me with my voice. I'm recuperating, but I'm here with a 90% of my voice, so I'm very happy to be here today. Before I begin ever talking to any group, I want to know who's in here. So I'd like to ask just a few questions. How many of you are freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, other? Okay. How many are majoring in liberal arts, College of Basic and Applied Sciences, College of Education, College of Media and Entertainment, Agriculture? Okay, others. All right. Now here's another question in relation to what we're going to talk about today. How many of you are an immigrant to the United States or member of a family of immigrants? Raise your hand. Okay. All right. So that's going to be the broad topic today, and so I'd like to give an overview, and let's get this going here. An overview of what I'll talk about today in terms of my work with Latinos, both in research and in community advocacy, and just some questions and stories that have come to me in my work with this group of beautiful people. We're going to talk about the DREAM Act and DACA, and I'll give you details on that and clarification, hopefully, if you are not clear on what that means. I'm going to give you a quick overview of my study with young Latino teens with essays that they've written and stories that they've told about their biculturalism. And then we'll look at some questions for your consideration. And so as we talk about Latinos in Tennessee, Hispanic, Latinos, Latin Americans, there are some things that we must remember when we talk about this population of people. There is a diversity of countries represented from Latin America. Some people have the the misperception that everyone's Mexican, and that's absolutely not true. I would venture to say almost every country in South America, in the Caribbean, and in Central America and Mexico are represented on our campus. There are diversities of cultures. The Latino culture, yeah, it's a broad umbrella, but there are many different cultures. Just as we would say, what's the American culture? There's not one American culture. There are multiple subcultures, and that's what we're talking about here as well. Diversity of language dialects. Spanish is the language, it's safe to say. But a story I have in that regard, when I first began to learn Spanish, began to learn it, I was learning from several of my friends. One of my friends was from Peru. One was from Mexico. Another was from Bolivia. Another friend came from Costa Rica. I could not understand why I was constantly confused, but I was learning pieces from each of the different countries, and it's a little bit different. It's still Spanish, but a little bit different. So diversity of language dialects, diversity of education levels, diversity of urbanicity. Some immigrants come from the country, some come from just outside the big cities, some come from smack dab in the middle of Mexico City or other large urban areas. Just like us, urban, suburban, and rural. So that defines people's identity. Diversity of generation of immigration. Some people are first-generation immigrants. They actually came here themselves. They traveled here. Others are second generation because their parents came. Others maybe third generation. Their grandparents came. So that generational effect is important to remember when we talk about immigrants, Latino immigrants, and diversity of citizenship status. Just a couple of statistics, just so that we have a relatively current context. In the population of the state of Tennessee, about 6.6 million right now. Of that population in Tennessee, over 333,000 are Latinos. That's 5% of our state population. In Davidson County, which is the largest concentration in Middle Tennessee, population of Davidson, 678,889, of which 67,768 are Latinos, and that's 10% of the population in Davidson County. We have pockets of Latino communities, Latino enclaves, Latino families across the state, from the Mississippi River to the Tri-Cities, working in various professions and bringing numerous cultures to our state. And so let's continue to look. Some terms I want you to remember as we talk today. Biculturalism. How life experiences are shaped by a cultural duality that results from an overlap of growing up in two cultures or living in two cultures. And, we all have a primary culture, and many of us have a secondary culture. And by the way, many of you American people, as I am, have two cultures that have affected you. And so in that way, you may consider yourself bicultural. Permanent residence, aka green card. This is when an immigrant has documentation that authorizes them to be in the United States, but they do not hold citizenship. That's permanent residence. Undocumented immigrants are immigrants who are in the United States without documentation that authorizes their presence here in the United States. We're going to talk about dreamers. Dreamers are the population of young immigrants mostly Latino, but not only Latino, who would benefit from the passage of the DREAM Act. And we're going to go into detail about the DREAM Act in just a moment. And then we will talk about DACA, the most recent federal action taken that benefits many Latino immigrants. I'll give you more details on these. So let's talk about DREAM Act and DACA. But before we do, give me some comments from you. What's the DREAM Act? Raise your hand, give me some feedback. And by the way, Zadie and Alejandro are here with me. They're members of La Comunidad, our work here on campus right now. You can't answer. You cannot respond to this. Anyone else? DREAM Act.
From my understanding, it was the act that allowed, that gave passage for undocumented people to have citizenship.
Okay, that's one idea. I saw you at Salsa the other night.
Yeah, it was, I don't know that much about it, but it was about legislation specifically for children of immigrants and undocumented immigrants.
Okay, all right. Give me some other. What do you know about the DREAM Act?
It involves education.
Okay. What else?
Building off what she just said, it involves like stipends for education so that children of an immigrant could get, say, in-state tuition where they're at.
Okay. All right, what else? All right, DREAM Act. Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act. 2009 was the last time it was introduced. This is proposed, notice, not passed, it's proposed federal legislation giving young, undocumented immigrants an opportunity to attend college or serve in the military in order to earn permanent residency, which is not citizenship, but it's permanent residency. It was first introduced in the United States Congress in 2001, and it was defeated. Reintroduced in 2007, defeated. Introduced again in 2009, and in December 2010, the last vote was taken on the DREAM Act. U.S. House of Representatives passed it. The United States Senate defeated it by 5 votes. With 5 more votes, it would have passed. And so that is the last time it has been voted on in the United States Congress because it was clear that at that time it was not going to move any farther through those channels. An executive announcement was made in 2012, DACA, which we'll look at right now. Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Imagine if you were living in this country, having come here with your parents when you were so little you can't even remember it, and you've been living here until now. You know, what is that, 15, 16, 17 years you've been living here. Brought here by your parents who are undocumented, okay? Something that's important to understand. Whatever the status of parents are is the same status that their immigrant children hold. That's not true, of course, if a child is born in the U.S. Of course, they're not an immigrant. They're a U.S. citizen if they're born here. But if a child comes with their parent, they hold the same status as their parent. And at this point in the situation of the United States, undocumented status cannot be resolved through any channels except to return to their country and come with a visa, which requires, in some cases, 10 to 15 years to acquire. And so it's not done. It's done sometimes, but very rarely, because for a number of reasons. You can imagine thinking of waiting for 10 to 15 years to get away from whatever situation is happening in your home, economic situation, crime situation, violence situation. So, DACA. June 15th, 2012, the announcement was made by Homeland Security. On that day, on June 15th of 2012, people who were younger than 31, that means 30 or younger, and who arrived in the U.S. before they turned 16. So think about where you were at that time. Would you fit in this category? Okay. If they had had continuous residence in the United States from 2007 to 2012, they had not gone back to their country, had not traveled abroad, if they were enrolled in an education program at the time of application, and if they have no criminal record, this person qualifies to apply to ask for consideration of deferred action. And deferred action simply means, if they're granted deferred action, it means that the federal government will not deport them at a moment's notice during the period of time that they're authorized under DACA. Because without this, each undocumented immigrant lives with the uncertainty every day when they leave their home of returning that night. And children live with the uncertainty of their parents coming home. Teenagers live with the uncertainty of being stopped for a broken headlight and detained and put in deportation process. With DACA, these teenagers now can have at least 2 years, if they are approved, with no criminal record. If they submit the forms, if they pass the background check, they become eligible to work. And that an ID usually comes with that. Some sort of an ID comes with that. But they can get a job, and they'll have a number to pay taxes, and they may not be deported by the federal government. What happens is they go to the end of the line of candidates for deportation, and the federal government is prioritizing deportation right now to be those who are dangerous and should not be here. Criminals, those committing acts of violence. So they are, deportations have gone on steadily every year. But these kids who are trying to live life and have a good record, make good grades, go to school, and help their family, now don't have to live in this fear if they've applied through DACA and they have been authorized through DACA. And so there are quite a number of DACA students now across the country. It has to be renewed every 2 years. So every 2 years, you give back evidence that you have a good record, you're not a criminal, you have maintained grades, you're still in an educational program, pursuing your education, and you can renew it. And so, one more sigh of relief. Okay, I've got 2 more years. I don't have to worry about being picked up and sent away. If you want more details, go to the U.S. Census site under the U.S. Customs and Immigration Services website, and that's where you can get all the details if you want more details about this. Any questions at this point about any of that? Yes?
Cover a couple, if that's okay.
A couple is good. And let me qualify this by saying I am not an attorney, and I'm not a leading expert on this. I'm knowledgeable of it. Okay? So go right ahead. What's your name?
Amanda.
Hi, Amanda. All right, what's your questions?
So I know that the DACA process seems to be pretty expensive, and so one of the questions that I was wondering is if there's any financial aid available.
I happened to read this, and I know a little bit about this. If a DACA candidate can prove that they are without income and or homeless, there is a possible stipend to pay the cost of applying for DACA.
And I was also wondering, because I know I'm from New York and I have many friends who are dreamers.
Yes.
And a lot of them were concerned about applying for DACA just because it put them on the radar, for lack of a better way to put it. And so I just was wondering how accurate it is to say that once you go through that process, that when your 2 years are up, you're kind of, if you don't get renewed, then you're back on top of the list.
Does anyone know of a DACA renewal? Okay. Okay. This is 2012 and we're now 4 years out. There are regular applications now. And here's the thing you have to remember. Please remember this. What you're looking at right up here is, this is policy. I've taken it off the government website. These are the rules. This is what it says is happening and should happen. We all know, even down to getting a traffic ticket and managing that. What happens on the ground, it doesn't always reflect exactly what the policy says, right? It's what's supposed to be happening. So, what is actually addressed on the USCIS website is to say that when a DACA student is in the pipeline for DACA, their information cannot be shared with Customs and Immigration Services. That is stated on the website. Okay. The one good thing about policy, though, it does hold water if you're going to take it to court when it's actually written and stated there. Okay? Any other comments? Yes. What's your name?
Adam.
Adam, I think I've met you. I think I've met you. Go ahead, Adam.
If you arrived later than 2012, does DACA in any way apply to you?
Not at this time. Okay. Yes.
This is more of a vague policy question.
And excuse me a minute, Adam. As I stand here, I'm going to investigate that, and if you want to follow up with an email to me, I will clarify that. But my understanding is it doesn't. Okay? Yes.
I know you mentioned the DREAM Act was proposed legislation, and
Yes.
you spoke of DACA as executive action.
I didn't say executive action. I think I said an executive announcement. But executive action is a common phrase used.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. And as far as, because I know some laws last a certain amount of time, is there an expiration date on DACA? Is it permanent?
It is. It can be revoked by the president. But until it is, it continues. So there are implications there, aren't there? Okay. All right. Any other comment, question? Let's continue. So I did a study, and at the time I started the study, I was doing some volunteer work with a group called Conexión Américas, a group in Nashville. Does a lot of great stuff in the community. Every year they held an essay contest for high school kids, high school Latinos. And they gave the title of the essay and kids submitted their work to a contest. And I happened to be on the judging panel of the contest. And suddenly in about the third or fourth year, I realized, oh my gosh, there's a research study right here in my hands with all these essays. And so, starting in 2009, essay contest, My Hispanic Roots, My American Dream was the name of the essay. And so essays were submitted to Conexión and judged by a panel of judges made up of community members. And when I went to Conexión and asked permission, they gave me permission to use these as the basis for a qualitative research study. And so, I have about 106 essays over a 5-year period written on the same topic by high school students. Their ages, they were as young as 14, as old as 18. They represented 12 Latin American countries and Puerto Rico. Mexico predominantly, but other countries represented from Central America: Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Cuba, Dominican, and from South America: Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. And these students attending high schools in Middle Tennessee. This was Williamson and Davidson is what they represented. It was 3, 4, 5 different high schools. And of course, Puerto Rico. Citizenship status of the writers varied. More than 70% of the writers identified themselves through their language as non-citizens. Non-citizens. Now, there's 2 categories there, right? One category can be permanent resident or undocumented, right? Now, there's a small category of asylees seeking asylum, but those are authorized, okay? Asylees and refugees are authorized. So 1/3 of the writers, undocumented, 70% non-citizen. So 106 essays. It was an open-ended topic. They had no guidance on what to do. They just wrote. They wrote whatever they thought. They were submitted by high school students beginning in 2009 through 2013. I've not picked it up since then, but I have intentions of going back to Conexión and picking up the last 3 years to see what it looks like still. But is there anything about that date range that jumps out at you? Yeah, thank you. When was DACA? And it was announced in 2012, okay? So look what we have here. We have writing before DACA and after DACA. Oh, did I jump through that? Okay. These are autobiographical narratives presenting their perceptions of their own biculturalism and their attitudes toward their biculturalism. Now, as you know, because you're conducting research, we do things like conceptual models, and we look at constructs. Well, I created a conceptual model for this because there were a number of things that I expected, but since it's qualitative, you have to see what emerges, right? So when I looked at the literature on this, the literature talked about things like immigrants are resilient people. They're resilient, they're persistent, they're strong, they hang in there. They're resilient. Immigrants are bicultural. And then as an educator, I wanted to look at their educational aspirations. This means, what are your hopes about education? What do you want to do in terms of education? What are your plans for education? So I wanted to look at that in terms of these immigrant kids. So I based it, if you ever want a really nice ecological systems theory, look at Bronfenbrenner, and I will not go into detail there. But Bronfenbrenner was one of the bases for my conceptual model here. And so I coded demographic data first. And so I figured out, were they male or female, what was their country, what was their age, citizenship status, grade level, and some data like what family structure did they live in, what was the educational attainment of their parents. And some of that was revealed and some was not, of course, because it was an open-ended essay, right? All right. The language of the essay, some wrote in Spanish, some wrote in English, some wrote in both. Country of origin, their age, members in the home, citizenship status, the year they submitted, And then I did a content analysis on educational aspirations. I looked for expressions of, I want to graduate from high school, I want to go to college, I want to get my PhD, I want to be a doctor, I want to go to tech school, I want to be a mechanic. I want to graduate high school because no one in my family ever graduated from high school. So it's content analysis where they made statements of what they hope to do. So, and then, luckily, we had educational aspirations prior to DACA, educational aspirations after DACA. And that was just coincidence. All right, so any comments at this point before I move on with findings? So first of all, I was really, really happy to see, happy to see the findings. When we looked at 9, 10, and 11, 45% expressed a desire to complete high school and or go to college. Post-secondary, that includes tech school. DACA was announced in 2012. June 2012, okay? These essays were written in August or September of 2012. So we were still about 48% at that point. The meetings about DACA had not been held yet. Information had not been dispersed to the community yet. In that coming year, all those things started. Applications started coming in from DACA. In 2013, 76% of the writers of these essays expressed a desire to graduate high school and or go to college. That's a significant jump. And I think it's fair to say we can attribute that to the conversation and the opportunity associated with DACA. I get goosebumps when I talk about this. So, comments, questions? Amanda?
I know that you mentioned that part of the DREAM Act was supposed to provide educational opportunities for DREAM eligible people. And I was wondering, because I know in New York, the CUNY system allows for undocumented students to claim in-state tuition.
Are you going to ask me a question? Because I'd like to jump in right there.
I was going to ask if MTSU provides that.
Okay. All right. I'm glad you piqued my memory on that. DREAM Act. Let's go back a minute. The DREAM Act we're talking about is federal legislation. But guess what? DREAM Acts can occur at the state level. Why? Because education is governed at the state level. K-12 is governed at the state level. Higher education is governed at the state level. Federal government does not govern education. Now, they do funding, they do laws that impact education, but governance does not happen at the federal level. Therefore, laws about things like admissions, definitions of who qualifies as in-state, can happen at the state level. California, Texas, Pennsylvania, New York, and other states during the years around DREAM Act were implementing their own DREAM Acts. I think it's safe to say Florida has one, but I don't know that for sure. So DREAM Act could be happening in Tennessee right now, but it is not happening here. Each university has some small level of discretion as to how they make decisions. And so I would leave it at that. That's all I can really say about it. But know that the DREAM Act effect is not just at the federal level. It can happen at the state level. All right? Comments? Yes.
Do you have any follow-up information about this is what they want to do? And you have any follow-up information as to if they are graduating and attending university?
No, and that would, because these students who wrote the essays were in a high school, they submitted, they graduated, they went on. And we've not tracked them. And that would really be interesting. Yeah. Okay. So now, I've brought to you some of their words. Because, you know, I'm an old white woman. I can talk about Latino immigrants all day, but I cannot really tell their stories because that's not my story. But I read their stories in their words. And so I'm going to share some of them with you. And I told you I was looking, biculturalism, resilience was evident throughout. And so I'm going to show you some words of resilience. I'm going to show you some words of educational aspirations. And so this writer said, through school, my teachers pushed me to do my best. They talked to me about scholarships and such, and then introduced me to the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act has inspired me. I've worked hard, and all my hard work has paid off. And then, without help, I fear that getting my high school diploma is the highest I'll be able to make it. My dream is to be able to graduate college and be able to help my family here, as well as my family in Mexico. All right, we know DREAM Act hasn't been passed yet, right? And we're in Tennessee. So that's, here's an example. And I took this word for word because this is, I've had reports of these things happening also personally to me. There was a time when this student went to a college fair and was interested in a specific college. So they went to the booth and introduced himself to the executive director of the university and engaged in a conversation with him. Everything was great, except when I asked him if the university offered any special programs for international students. The gentleman's smile turned to a frown, and he harshly replied, "No." I then continued to ask how students could go to the university if they were not a USA resident. His face turned into a frowning, serious face, and he said, "In that case, there's nothing I can do about it." He turned around and he went to the next person in line. The bullet had hit me in the heart, and I promised myself from that day forward that I would be the student every university would beg to attend their university. Now that's more than educational aspirations, that's resilience personified right there. But this happens, you know, it happens, and it happens on an individual basis. Listen, y'all, sometimes when we talk about things in terms of groups, media, and statistics, it's very impersonal. But when we talk to someone face to face, it takes on a whole new meaning. So this was a face-to-face encounter here. Another educational aspiration. I promised I was going to school to go to college and make a career. I promised my grandmother I was going to give her my diploma when I graduated from college. A very important promise, and I must fulfill. And then resilience. I have dreams so big that sometimes makes me impossible. The translations weren't perfect here. I know I can make it in life just like my brothers did, instead of dropping out of school or getting pregnant at an early age like everyone thinks most Latinas are all about. So we're talking about breaking stereotypes here, right? Resilience. I want to make a difference and show young teens not to give up and to reach their dreams no matter what situation you're in. There's always hope, and we can all succeed when we set our minds to our goals. Universally true. And then biculturalism. Listen to some of these stories. During the time I was a little girl, my mother would only talk to me in English, which would become a big issue when I was 7 years old and did not know how to speak Spanish. During the summer, I went back to Mexico for a break with my sister. I picked up Spanish very quickly, and when I returned to Nashville, I was accompanied with a Spanish accent. Since then, I've promised myself never to let my culture slip between my fingers again. This is a description of biculturalism, of learning one language, learning another language, how they fit together. And I have a proposition to make to you. We're bicultural in language. Do you know why? Is there a way that you speak in professional and formal situations and a way that you speak on the street? Yeah. Do you know when to speak what? And do you ever mix it up? And is it part of who you are? Are they both part of who you are? All right. It's the same thing. Biculturalism. To know that when I finish school and go back to my country, I will feel sad and afraid. I'm used to the cultures of the United States of America. I'm used to it here. But it's my duty to be in my country where I have my roots, but I no longer know anything or know its history. Its customs give me a nostalgic feeling, but I feel that my country's here in the United States and that my roots are here because this is where I grew up. That's biculturalism. That's the bicultural dilemma. Another story of biculturalism. I always ask my dreams that everything they fought is worth something. That's syntax a little bit off there. That everything my parents worked for, giving us a good life, has a valuable reward. It's nice to dream an American dream. It's nice to imagine and think about every day, but it's very difficult to do and actually do. The American dream, anyone can play, but not everyone succeeds. And the last quote about biculturalism. What I also realized that even though I knew Hispanic customs and was raised in them, I was also raised up in American customs. And I could not truly understand my Hispanic heritage unless I completely embraced my heritage. Some questions for you to consider as we think about this topic, these ideas. How does a young Latino's family heritage and values affect their life experiences in Tennessee, including their educational aspirations? How does a Latino immigrant teen's citizenship status affect their educational aspirations and opportunities? How do the dynamics of biculturalism affect Latino teens' life experiences in Tennessee? I am so pleased for Zadie and Alejandra to join me today, and they can speak from experience in living biculturally. They are working with me in La Comunidad. I know there are some others sitting in this room that I haven't met that also can speak to the bicultural experience. Would any of you like to make a comment or ask a question? You don't have to, but I'm seeing your smiling faces. Yes.
My name is Cody Lister. I'm a Master's of Arts student in the Liberal Arts program here at MTSU.
Yes.
I actually went to study abroad to Mexico, and I grew up in Tennessee for, I'm 26, so it's about almost 26 years of my life I've been in the South.
Right.
And so there's kind of that cultural bias that's you just kind of go with it, you go with the flow, you meet people, you talk to them, you kind of develop opinions about people. I mean, not necessarily like negative, prejudiced opinions, but you can kind of understand that when you hear that from other people and things like that. So I went to Mexico, and I got back, and I completely saw the Latino American community completely different than I did before.
Yes.
Even in the ways that they spoke and talked, I could kind of relate to them, and I could kind of sympathize a little bit more as well, and be empathetic to the problems and concerns that they had.
Cody, that's you nailed something right there, and it's the benefit of travel, the benefit of immersing yourself in another culture and coming back a different person with different eyes, a different lens.
I'll actually be going back down to Mexico for my friend's wedding. I made a friend down there, so I'll be going to his boda, so I get to see how the Mexican wedding is.
Nice. That's great. Yeah. Yes, uh-huh.
I have a question.
Yes.
So this summer I went to Chile.
Yes.
And so like you were saying earlier, like I have friends that are from Mexico and then I have friends that are Puerto Rican. And so they all have different little words for everything. And so how do you juggle all of those together? Because we had lots of instances where it's like, oh, it's this. And they're like, no, it's not. So how do you juggle all of that?
You just keep learning because, as I told you, it took me about 3 years to figure out why I was so confused. And just know that, you know, you might qualify when you're speaking with someone, so help me out with this because I know, you know, we're speaking in the Chilean form of Spanish. My only advice is be aware of it and just keep learning. But good point, yes.
This is more objective. This is just a random question. Is there related to what she was asking, is there kind of a lingua franca among the different dialects that are spoken? So say if someone from Chile and someone from Mexico were to converse, how different are the dialects? I mean, can you understand one another across the dialect?
Alejandra?
I can answer that.
Okay.
Alejandra, would you stand up, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm actually from Honduras.
Alright.
I only have 6 years living in the States, so
Gotcha.
it's been 28 years for me trying to understand what a Mexican person talks about. Even one word, it means totally different in Honduran. One example of that will be how we say money. For us, is pisto. In Mexico, pisto means go to drink alcohol. So it's been it's different, but the general language itself, it will be the same. I will say our the formal language comes from Spain. So I will say there is the purest Spanish. And then ours in Latin America will be that's where it's coming from. We just shift a little bit words, like in English we'll call that slang.
Right.
And you have slang in different parts of the United States, like in the South, the North, East, West.
For sure.
So you have that kind of difference, like how in the South you guys say y'all, but in the North you don't have that. So it's kind of the same in Spanish in different countries.
Understood.
I hope that answers you.
It does. Thank you.
Zadie, any comments on that?
What she said.
What she said, okay. Yes. Love your hair.
Thank you. For Alejandra again. Would the surest bet, if you were trying to be understood in the most places in Central and South America, would it be to learn Spanish, like Spain Spanish? Or
No, you will just have to be careful on
just be really perceptive.
right.
Okay.
Just try to be general on what you're trying to understand. I believe in United States what you learn as Spanish is mostly Mexican or what Mexicans speak. One example of that will be Órale. Have you guys heard that expression? I really don't know what it means, but they say it a lot. So it's just general Spanish. If you try to learn more, go more deep into the language, you will learn different words or meanings for the word.
I can add to your question.
Okay.
I'm a first generation Mexican American, and I didn't speak Spanish until I was 7. I went back to Mexico, and my Spanish is very formal. However, I still understand slang. I understand it less than a native speaker, of course, but I can understand a lot of Spanish and non-Spanish. I can understand a lot of other kind of related, just not exactly. And I don't know if it's just me, but if you're gonna speak to me in like native saying Spanish or Mexican Spanish or someone from Honduras or something, I can understand it because it's very similar and they derive from the same thing.
Okay.
So if you use your context clues and everything, you definitely get it.
Okay.
And there's 4 ways we experience language. We read it, we write it, we speak it, we hear it. And people have varying degrees of expertise in the 4 areas. Some of us can listen to it better than we can speak it. Other comments? Questions? Thank you for that. What's your name?
Oh, I'm Jessica Palmeri. I'm a freshman here at MTSU.
Jessica. All right, thanks for adding to that.
And adding to what I added to, accents. Usually the most difficult part is understanding the accents.
Accents.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
But if you could kind of get it, like the accent itself, you can understand more.
Jessica, within the United States, there are Americans that speak sometimes that I don't understand, and they're speaking English. So just know that what we're describing in this multiculturalism exists in the U.S. And we just have to see it in that way. We're already experiencing it. All right. It's been my pleasure to be here. There's one more thing. If you are of Latino descent, I want you to be aware of La Comunidad and watch for the emails. And then and others who are interested in that culture are welcome to experience La Comunidad with us. So thank you, Dr. Phillips.
Thank you.